So I had to tell him that that was just the absolute worst thing that you could be doing in an ACT prep class. My name's Carson Weekley. I got a 36 on my ACT, and over the last 6 years, I helped thousands of students get to their dream scores as well. In this video, I'm gonna be sharing exactly why that ACT prep class that you took didn't work for you and what you should be doing instead to get ready for the next test. There are 3 main problems that I see with ACT prep classes in today's market. So here's what they are and what you should be looking for instead if you're signing up for a prep class. So getting right into it, the first problem that I see with ACT prep classes in today's market is repetitive practice questions with no real learning that actually goes on. So if you watch my content, you know that I'm actually a huge fan of doing ACT practice questions, especially if they're realistic practice tests and they come from the maker of the ACT themselves, rather than just some questions that are not going to be realistic to what you see on the test. But the problem with prep classes is that they focus exclusively on these practice questions, and they really don't do anything other than just have the students take practice tests. In order to actually see improvement on the ACT, you have to actually learn the material that you're struggling on and find a way to ingrain that material in your mind so that when you see that question show up on the actual ACT, you do something differently than you did on your practice test when you got that question wrong. So I actually just had a student come to me the other day, and he had just finished up an ACT prep class, took the ACT, felt decent about it, but when he got his score back, he realized that he didn't really improve that much from where he started out. So of course I was curious as to what he was doing during that prep class, like what he liked about it, what he didn't like about it, and so on and so forth. And he said he really enjoyed the fact that they just did a lot of practice tests and they went over the answers together in the group class, and he felt like that was a good approach to getting him ready for the ACT. And I think a lot of times both students and like group class instructors can really think that ACT practice tests are just the only thing you need because they feel like you're actually doing something. The student feels like he or she is really putting the work in, and the instructor really feels like he or she is explaining the concepts pretty well when they go over the incorrect answers together in class. But the problem that this student ran into is that when they would go together to the group class, all they really did was the instructor would explain how to do all of the commonly missed questions. So if that student had missed a couple questions, then the instructor would just explain exactly what they should have done instead. And that's a process that feels like learning to the student. It feels like, oh, okay, this instructor is really smart, like he's showing me exactly what I need to be doing on this practice question. And it feels like, okay, we're making some good progress here. But that's not the right way to learn new material. If you're just being spoon-fed the correct answer and the correct process to getting to the right answer, then you're not actually making new connections in your brain. And the next time you see that same practice question that you missed, you're not going to actually know how to do it because you didn't do it yourself. All you did was you watched somebody else do it. That would be like LeBron James going into the gym every day, and instead of actually working on his shot and what he specifically needs to be doing the next time he shoots, it would be like if he just watched his teammates shoot baskets over and over again. Or it'd be like if he went into the weight room and he just watched his teammates lift weights over and over again. So that's the big problem with what my student was going through and what I see with a lot of students going through in these generic ACT prep classes is that they're taking practice tests and then they're just watching or listening to the solutions rather than actually forcing themselves to understand the new concept or understand that concept that they missed and apply it to a similar type of practice question so they can actually create the new connections in their brain and get that question right the next time that they see it. So what they should be doing instead, and what you should be looking for in an effective practice program, is one where the instructor shows the student how to solve that type of question and then make sure that they're actually learning by giving them similar question types and making sure that that student can solve that similar question type, not the exact same question, but a very similar question. They should be able to solve that without having the instructor spoon feed the correct answer to them. And until the student is able to consistently solve those similar question types with no help from the instructor, then the student is not ready to move on from that concept. The student has not actually learned how to solve those question types. And now the second big problem that I see with these ACT prep classes is that a lot of times there's no personalized instruction at all with most of these group classes. I've had students come to me after taking some of these classes and they would just tell me that there was like 50, 60, 70, sometimes even 100 students in the same group class. And sometimes they didn't even know how many students were in the class because they couldn't see everybody who was on the Zoom screen at the same time. And now, obviously, there's a number of big problems with this, but the one problem that I would really point out here. If there's no personalized attention, then the student's just going to be wasting a lot of time covering concepts that they don't need to cover. And they're not going to be spending nearly enough time on the concepts that they do need to cover. When you're teaching to a class of 100 people, you just kind of have to pick the average and teach the average. And so unless you're the average student and you miss all of the average questions, then this class is probably not going to help you too much because it's going to be covering a lot of things that you just don't need to cover. As someone who personally hates wasting time in any way, shape, or form, I would probably be miserable in a class like this. I would want personalized instruction to the places where I need to spend my time working on, and I wouldn't want to spend a bunch of time working on concepts that I already know. So if I'm really good at SOHCAHTOA questions and I'm really good at statistics questions, then why would I spend 2 hours in a class that talks only about SOHCAHTOA questions and statistics questions? What I would really want to do is focus on my weaknesses. So if I'm not that great at things like systems of equations questions and abstract math questions, then I would want to spend most of my time covering these two things and not just covering everything that everybody else needs to know on the ACT. I need to spend my time on the things that I'm weakest on. So if you're looking into a group ACT prep class right now, what I would be definitely on the lookout for is how many students are in the class, how much access does the student have to the person who's actually leading the class, and how do they plan to focus on your students' individual strengths and weaknesses versus just covering everything that other students need to know on the test. And now the third and final problem that I see with a lot of these big prep classes is that they're being advertised by large companies who seem like well-respected and like reputable in the prep space. But a lot of times you're not getting instructors who are the ones kind of advertising the class itself, or you're not getting like the founder of the company. You're getting somebody who the founder hired to teach that class for them. A lot of times they're just like even high school students themselves. Sometimes you may get like someone who recently graduated high school and did pretty well in their ACT, but a lot of times there's even just high school students who just took the ACT themselves and maybe they did well on it, but either way, you're not getting someone who has a lot of experience teaching students how to do well on the ACT. So again, obviously there's a couple kind of glaring issues here, but there's two that I kind of think are the most important to point out here. So one is that if you just have a student who just took the ACT, him or herself, then they may not even have comprehensive knowledge of the content and the strategy that you need in order to do well on the ACT. A lot of times I've seen these classes being taught by students who have scored maybe like a 33 or a 34 on the ACT, which are no doubt great scores, but that does not at all mean that that student has mastered everything on the test. Even if you get a 35 or a 36, you could still have gotten that without really knowing every single thing that there is on the test and not knowing the best strategy that might work for a different range of students. And now the second problem with some of these like younger and more inexperienced instructors is that a lot of times, even if they do have all of the content and strategy that we just talked about for the first problem, is that they don't actually have a way of effectively communicating that knowledge to other students. So I think this is kind of a tougher problem to tackle here, but just think about it. Even if you know something very well and you know everything that there is to know about some topic, do you know how to effectively explain that topic and get somebody else to actually learn and understand what that topic is or what that piece of knowledge that you're trying to get into their brain is? Teaching somebody how to learn something is a completely different skill than just being very skilled on the ACT itself. And so those are two separate things that you have to look for with who's instructing your class. And so obviously if you're looking into a prep class, you want to do some research on who's actually teaching the class and what their experience is, how well they know the content and the strategy, and how well they've actually done this in the past and gotten other people to learn from them the material that they're teaching. And so those are the three main problems that I see with ACT prep classes. Now, I don't want to make it seem like I'm completely trashing on all ACT prep classes because I've actually taught group classes myself in the past, and we've had some great outcomes for a lot of the students who joined those classes. And I do think that there are some great benefits. Like I think a lot of times these classes can be more cost effective if you get into the right one. I think this is really not always the case because a lot of the prep classes that I see are charging exorbitant prices and they're not even providing any of the personalized value. They're making a lot of the mistakes that I talked about in this video. But if you can find a group class that doesn't make the mistakes that I talked about and they provide a decent price for that class, then I think the cost effectiveness can be there for some of these group classes. And the next thing that I think is good is it provides the student with some sort of accountability. I think group classes can really give students just a reason to show up every day and get their work done. And it also gives them a good schedule that they can stick to. I think having a schedule is one of the most important things that a student can have in terms of getting ready for the ACT. And so it can provide them with that accountability to make sure they stick to that schedule, and it gives them the schedule that kind of tells them where they need to be going in order to get ready for the test. So if you're looking into an ACT prep class for your student right now, then you would want to make sure that that class is avoiding the 3 main mistakes that I talked about, and you would want to weigh both the pros and the cons of the group structure like this. But I do think that there is a better option than group classes for most, if not all, students out there. And that's why I personally have my coaching program, which is an individualized process. So every student that I work with gets one-on-one access to me, and they get a program that's tailored specifically to what they need to be working on. They're not going to be spending any time trying to learn concepts that they already know, and they're going to be spending all of their time working on their weak points and actually making that improvement. And second off, I never just give students repetitive practice tests without having them actually go through the learning process to make sure that they're improving their scores and they're improving their ability to answer those questions that they're weakest on. And then third, I never pass off my students to another instructor who doesn't have the same experience that I do. I personally work with all the students in my coaching program. I never just pass them off to anybody else. But obviously, along with all the personalization that I provide to my students, I'm not able to work with every single student who wants to work with me. So that's definitely one of the downsides there. But if you are interested in having me personally coach you or your student through the ACT, then what you can do is you can apply at the link probably somewhere down below this video, and we'll have an initial strategy call just to see if it would be a good fit for us to work together. Again, I don't have the time or the capability to work with every single student who wants to work with me. So if you're filling that out, make sure to be as thorough as possible with all of your details. The other way you can get in touch with me is through Instagram. So if you want to, go ahead and follow me over there on Instagram, and you can shoot me a direct message. I do respond to all direct messages that I get on Instagram. So if you're interested in hearing more about the program, or if you want to apply from the Instagram page, you can do that as well. But other than that, make sure to keep following along here on YouTube and over on Instagram. I put out a lot of great content on both of these platforms. And if you're looking for free information on the ACT and the college preparation process, stay tuned to both of these channels, and I will see you in the next one.